Right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 5, which is going to be goal setting part 2 and motivation. And to start us off today, we have 2 lovely assistants. Please clap them in, who are going to be revising the priority matrix for us, and we'll talk our way through that as we go. Please feel free to help them in a positive, non-shouty way. All right, thanks ladies, off you go. There's the color coding, yes. So guys, the biggest concern with the feedback was this is quite easy to arrange. It's what happens in that space. Okay, so, and that's the answers that Mrs. Aitchison was referring to. So write in there where we should be spending the most time and explain to me why. And give me examples of it. Talk me through it. Yes, 0% of our working time in not important, not urgent. 5% in not important and urgent. So let's just talk about that a bit. Why is it 5%? Is it by choice that we want to be in that space?
Guys.
So why 5%? What's happening in that space? Give me an example.
Mostly just studying and not doing homework.
Well, essentially in that space we have distractions. So put your hand down for now. It's distractions. So it's your friend phoning you on a cell phone. And I used the example of you in the middle of studying for a test and she's broken up with it. It's not important in terms of the context of working. Okay, that explains why. Give me one sec. But it could be you busy studying and your sister comes in or your brother comes in or your mom comes and says take the trash out. It's distractions. It's not really important, but it's urgent because it has to be dealt with. Okay, so what about the other 2? Where do we want to be spending most of our time, Bridget? Which one of those 2?
Important, not urgent.
Okay, why?
Because it could be a project that's due for next week. It's not urgent.
It's not due tomorrow.
Yeah.
So it has great value, but time is not a constraint.
Yeah.
Homework does not fall in that space because homework is usually due for the next day. Does that make sense? So we want to spend most of our time in there, so put 80% in there. Right, which leaves us 15% in urgent and important. So what are examples of that? I know you know, that's why you're not standing at the board. I've just given you one, homework. Homework's due now and it's of great importance. So it's urgent and important. Okay, what else would that be, for example? You wake up with a toothache. Your teeth are important to you. You want to be able to chew food when you're 80 and it's sore, so you have to deal with it now. Or you wake up with a tummy bug. It's urgent and important. Does that make sense? But if you've got an orthodontic appointment, it's been planned. Or you're going to have your medical checkup, it's planned, but it's not urgent, so it's important and not urgent. Do you understand that?
Isn't the not important and urgent, it depends on your personal morals, like
Your values,
your
yeah.
values.
But I mean, it also depends on the environment. Your values might be that picking up the dog poo or taking out the trash is not important and not urgent, but your family might feel otherwise.
Yeah.
It's a distraction. It's something that needs to get done. It's not going to go away, but it's not part of your planning.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So essentially, we can call this one the interruptions. Okay?
Yes.
Or the distractions. Well done. Cool. You're going to get real ones today. No, you don't intercept it. Don't even go there. Okay. So, this is to help you understand, guys. And Mrs. Aitchison spoke to the headmasters. We went to a headmasters meeting this week Tuesday. It felt like last week. That's the holiday in between. And they were talking about prioritizing because it causes stress when you're sitting in this space. And she shared this with the headmasters of all the other private schools because it's something that we still use as adults. So guys, This is a framework that you can use physically, or it's one that you impose on the work that you're busy doing. You can visualize it and name and structure things like that. Does that make sense? Okay. So guys, are we all on the same page with this? It's more a mindset, and you've seen how it can be adapted to suit yourself. Does that make sense? Yes? So we started talking about smarter goals. And I spoke about 2 basic rules about writing your goals down. Right, so I'm not going to have everybody come up to the board, but let's talk about it. Who wants to give me one of the letters without looking? Specific.
Oh, sorry. No.
Yes?
A for achievable.
Achievable. I.e.
Attainable.
That's also fun. Yes?
M for measurable.
Measurable.
Is that measurable? I said measurable.
You're mixing your vowels. Yeah.
A for evaluate.
Who hasn't had a turn, yes?
Realistic.
It's realistic.
Oh, sorry.
Time.
Time.
I think
Please.
I know. Revise.
Revise. Virtual. Well done.
Why you? So if I wanted to be a pro gamer, would I revise my me gaming?
Well, if you lost your... so if you want to be a programmer and you got carpal tunnel syndrome, it stops...
What is that?
It's from overexertion of the joints on your
Wrist.
and your thumbs so that it hurts and you can't do it anymore. Yes, you'd have to revise your goals. So, right, what is rule number 1, guys? What is the first rule? First rule of Fight Club. First rule of?
Don't talk about Fight Club.
That is the right rule for Fight Club.
And second rule is don't speak about rule number 1.
Right. So the first rule is use or write it down. You write your goals down because it is a contract with yourself. It makes them feel achievable. And the second thing is we write in or an erasable medium so that we can evaluate and revise. Does that make sense? Okay. Who can tell me what the difference is between a dream and a goal? Is there a difference?
Oh, there is a difference.
Yes?
A dream doesn't have a plan where a goal does.
Okay, so you insert plan into dream, it becomes a goal. Very good. And essentially a plan is just breaking things down. Right. All of you had to do a smarter goal for me. Who would like to share one of their goals quickly? And what I'm going to do is I'd like to erase this if you don't mind. We're going to write, I can't write it there. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to take your goal and I'm going to write it down, and then we're going to evaluate it as a tool. I'm going to do one of them for time purposes. Evaluate it against Smarter and see if it ticks all the criteria. Right. Who wants to give me a goal? Come on.
I have a goal.
Go, Bridget, shoot.
Jump 1 meter in a horse riding course.
That it? Okay. So Bridget, I'm going to start with you evaluating it, and then we're going to add to it or take away from it. If other people want to contribute, we can do that. All right. So, is it specific?
Yes.
What is specific about it?
The distance.
Okay, so there's a height.
No, it's a height.
All right. It's height. I think horses step 1 meter when they're walking, okay? What I find course ambiguous.
What course?
Is it a show jump or is it casual? Is it a show? What?
Just a course of jumps.
Okay.
About 10 jumps or 5.
At a riding school or in the field? Do you want to do cross country?
In a show.
In a show. Would you like to do it in a show? Have you done a show before?
Yes.
Okay, so we say 1 meter in a show. Right, are we specific enough? So we know where we're going to do it, and we know that it's 1 meter. Okay. Right. Is it measurable?
Yeah.
1 meter is a very specific thing, and it's measurable. All right? Is it attainable?
Yes.
Well, we don't know. We need to ask a couple of questions. Well, how high are you jumping at the moment?
90.
90. So 10 centimeters more. And how long have you been jumping 90?
About a year.
Okay. Can your horse/pony jump 1 meter?
Yes.
Okay. So it is attainable.
Yes.
Why haven't you done it yet?
Because I'm too scared.
Okay. I have to ask the questions. If there's a barrier to it happening, there might be a reason why it's not attainable. Okay. Fear we can overcome. Is it realistic?
Yes.
She's not saying I want to jump 6 foot or something like that. Okay.
That'd be fun.
Does it have time associated with it?
Yes.
Not really.
No. Where's the time? You haven't told me by when or when you want to do it.
So it's relaxed.
But it's not relaxed. There needs to be a time. So what is your time goal on this? By the end of the year, before you turn 16, before you're 21?
I mean, Elon Musk dance.
6 months? 3 months?
6 months.
You think 6 months from now?
Yeah.
Okay. You seem a bit dubious about this. You're comfortable with 6 months?
Yeah.
Okay. So we add in 6. Let's make that a number. Yes?
Yes.
Right. So time's there.
Can we correct you on punctuation?
You can.
But you just did it. You changed it before you could.
Yeah, but
Right.
I didn't notice.
Do we need to evaluate this? We've just done it.
Yeah.
So we've done our first evaluation of it, and there's no need to. We have revised it slightly. We've added in time and 6 months. Okay? Now you've got something to work towards. Now you can take your goal and you can break it down. You can break it down into
Months.
your months if you want to. So, Bridget, okay, so that's you writing your goal down. This is you laying out the plan. So, Bridget, what do you need to do right now to start doing this? So, I have a question for you. This is the reason why we haven't achieved this goal is because of? Have you ever jumped 1 meter yet?
Yeah. But not English.
Not in a show. Did you do it by accident or on purpose?
On purpose.
Okay.
Teacher made me do it.
Made you do it. Okay. So my suspicion is that, and you wouldn't notice the 10 centimeters, is one pole higher. If you went to your teacher and shared the goal and said, we need to start doing this, but I'm scared, and they mixed it up that you were jumping 1 meter without you even realizing it. Because if they told you, does that make sense?
Yeah.
So they might have to move the pacing pole slightly back so your horse has got a little bit more space. But I can tell you most horses can jump 1 meter without making much difference. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's all in your mind, not so much the horse. Am I right? Is your horse big? Okay.
Do you have photographs of yourself jumping 90 centimeters?
Yeah.
Because I can almost guarantee you, if you go back and look at the photographs, the height that your horse is at, you're already jumping. If you go and look at the height of
The
your
trajectory,
horse,
yeah.
above the pole, right in the middle of the jump. I think you're already doing it. 10 centimeters is that. You're telling me your horse's hooves are right now not clearing that.
So we're getting a little bit involved here, but we're giving you some ideas on how you can overcome your fear. You can have a reality check, okay? Or you can fool yourself by asking your teacher to help and raise it without you even knowing about it. Does that make sense? Okay. Another thing that might be useful is to actually go and do some cross-country jumps. Because you don't know how high they are. Does that make sense? And then go measure them later and you get an idea. And sometimes they look bigger because the poles are bigger or they're wider or something. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
I don't know. Just some strategies people are sharing with you. Right. So what to do? Practice some more. But what is practice? I think you need to go and share that goal with your riding instructor. I think that's the first step. The second step is to slowly start mixing it up until you're jumping more than that. And can I make a suggestion to you? I would suggest, have you jumped 90 in a show yet?
Yeah.
And you've jumped 1 meter but not in a show.
Yeah.
So my suggestion is before you go and do the 1 meter show, make sure that you've jumped 110 outside of the show. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Why?
You become more confident.
So you're not just reaching, when you're in your show, you're not just reaching the limit of your competence. You know that you've jumped it and slightly more comfortably. So I'm learning 110 and I'm very comfortable with 100, therefore I'm competing at that level. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So maybe that's how we know when you're ready to jump the show at 1 meter. Because in practice you've already gone and done a couple at 110. How does that sound? How's 110? Yes? Yes?
Isn't it also so that it makes your next goal to maybe jump 1.30 m more achievable, more easier to
Yeah.
overcome?
Are you going to stop trying to go higher when you've reached 1 meter? So it's realistic that if we stretch ourselves a little bit and start preparing for the next goal as well, huh?
Another way you can train for it is like add like two centimeters
Each time.
like a month.
Okay. So it's not possible to add 2 centimeters a month in horses. Is it 5, I think, between the jumps? And also it depends. I mean, if your jumping arena has soft sand, you might be doing 2 centimeters or 5 centimeters depending. I mean, now that it's wet and there's puddles. So you can only go up in increments of 5 centimeters because of the way that the jumps are structured. Does that make sense? Okay. Another way to do it is, I remember my teacher doing it, putting the one side at 1 meter and the other side of the jump at 90 and seeing which way it goes. Does that make sense?
Which way the horse goes?
No, you steer the horse. If the horse is steering you, you've got a problem. Okay. So, but it means that it doesn't look as serious. It means if you're feeling that you're a bit intimidated, you can take the slightly shorter route. Does that make sense? So Bridget, we've analyzed your goal. Is there anything you want to add? Or do you think we're being unrealistic with you? You think we've got some strategies going here?
Yeah.
So would you mind writing that down quickly? And then by the end of the study skills course, we're going to ask you how it's going. All right. So what I'd like the rest of you to do now, did you see how we analyzed that? I'd like you to take your SMARTER goal and analyze it in the same way. And if you would like questions or suggestions, put up your hand and we can talk about it. I'm going to give us a couple of minutes to do that, okay? Was that useful, Bridget? Thanks for sharing that with us.
Is there a specific question you want on this?
I think for the students watching the video and not sitting in the class, you need to evaluate your SMARTER goals that I asked you to do last week and evaluate the goals. Spend some time doing that as an activity right now. And then perhaps asking your peers or your teachers or your parents if there's anything else that you can add to that. Are those all your goals? Is that one goal?
Yeah.
Okay. That looks intense, dude.
Yeah.
What's the goal?
Yeah.
I don't know what the measurable would be in mind
Okay, so are you happy to share your goal? So what is your goal?
to reach nationals at interschools this year.
To reach nationals at interschool. Right, so what do you need to qualify?
I need to have the school
Okay, so what scores do you need?
I need the highest scores out of the group of schools that are competing.
So that's the measurable part.
Okay.
I need the following scores in the following show jumping competitions, in school competitions, Sinisa competitions, to be selected for nationals or go to nationals. Does that make it more measurable? And I would add in at a certain height. So what height are you jumping?
Well, my next one I want to do the meter run.
Okay, so that's what you're doing.
So then
And Tiana, I think it's important that you don't mix the two things up. If it is at your age group appropriate to be doing 90, and that is more likely to get you into nationals than doing 100, a 1 meter, then you must decide, is it jumping higher that's your important priority or getting into nationals? If it's age appropriate. Does that make sense? So if I want to do nationals, and that's more important than doing 1 meter, because 1 meter sounds more ego. National sounds more like an achievement. That's where you need to differentiate. Does that make sense? What's more important to you? Do you have a better chance of getting at 90, which is age appropriate? Then do that. Maybe next year you've got 1 meter, whatever the case would be. So don't mix the two goals up. All right. Yes.
I don't know if it's measurable. I don't know how to measure it.
What? So read it.
Pro gamer at Fortnite.
Programmer at?
Pro
Yes.
gamer at Fortnite.
And when is Fortnite?
No,
What is it, a game?
It's a game.
Okay. So there's a lot that has to happen in that space. Okay, including buying nappies for the amount of time you need to sit in front of the, yeah. So that is very vague, and it sounds more like a dream than a goal for me. Because there's none of the smarter parts in there.
Well, there is.
I don't see it.
Start off by being good at squads, then move to duos, then move to solo.
But there's nothing, is it attainable, measurable, realistic? Is there time involved? I don't see any of that in that statement.
Yeah, but time.
So just stop and listen to me.
Okay.
You have a dream. You need to apply all those skills. That's a dream. You need to put a plan in there. And what you're telling me when I'm asking you the questions needs to be in your goal.
Yeah.
And your goal can be a paragraph long if it needs to be, yes.
I don't know if there's measurable. To master the butterfly stroke in 4 months.
Master the butterfly stroke.
Yes, so I'm good at it, I just want to master it.
So I think we need to change the word master to something that is not, because your idea of mastership as other people is different. So to be able to have my technique 100%, or to be able to do a length in a certain time, do you see how I'm going? How do you measure that the butterfly stroke has been mastered?
Can't really.
You can, and generally it's by the speed at which you get across the pool. So that's the measurable part. And obviously having a coach looking at the form of it. So that's where you can get the measurable and stuff like that. Clearly it's realistic and attainable because you're really quite good at it. So put in, I will know that I've mastered it if I can in 6 months, swim this length in this time frame. And is that a realistic time frame for you? And compared to other people, I mean, you might take 2 hours and that's your best effort and you've mastered it. But in reality, most people take 30 seconds. Have you mastered it then? That's why mastery is a bit of a dodgy concept. So what does that mean for you? What does mastership mean for you? We can put time in there and we can have a professional evaluating the technique. Include that in it. Okay. Ms. Nell, how are you doing there? Do you need help?
I don't know.
You don't know. Would you like to share? You don't have to.
My goal is just learning basic Japanese by the end of the year.
Okay. So you need to define what basic Japanese is.
Well, I said the
Yes.
basic greetings, the basic calligraphy, and the basic meanings.
Okay. Do you have is it realistic?
I think it's.
Have you got a teacher?
I've got a course type thing.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got a time frame in there. So what's the confusion?
I don't think there's confusion.
Okay. Sounds good. It sounds like you've got a plan. You've got someone to do it and you've evaluated. Have you ticked off all the smarter part of it? Okay. You're good. No questions.
Definition of measurable.
Sorry?
Definition of measurable.
Measurable means that you can measure it. So measurement, if you think about maths, time, distance, or currency. So it could be a cost, it could be height, or it could be time, or distance, or something like that. So we measure things based on units of measurement.
So how does this sound? Is this specific enough? I want to get into MIT University when I'm 18 years old.
Okay, MIT has a lot of courses.
Robotics.
So you need to be specific on what you want to do at MIT.
So programming and robotics or mechanical engineering.
So you write that down.
So, what is an MIT?
What is an MIT? Institute of Technology. Yeah, it's Einstein taught there and studied there.
Oh, is that like an American?
American University, yeah.
Right.
Okay. Are you good? No, you're struggling. Right. Are you prepared to share? Right, shoot.
I
Yeah.
want to bake cakes.
Yes.
I want to bake cakes over 2 years.
Over 2 years. Do you think it's going to take you 2 years to learn to bake a cake?
No, I know how to bake a cake. I just want to be good at it. It's when I'm 16 years old.
Okay, so how many cakes can you bake? How many types of cakes can you bake
I can bake one time.
at the moment? How many types are possibly able to be baked?
Many.
Hundreds, yeah, there's lots of them. So I think you need to be specific about what types of cakes you want to bake. So for an example, one of our matrics from 2 years ago went to study to be a pastry chef. It was a course for 1 year and she got employed in his baking. And that's just one part of that. 2 years, I think you can make it shorter than that. And I think you should be specific about what cakes you want to bake. So I'd like to learn to bake these. How many basic cakes?
I would say pick 5 basic cakes.
Pick 5 basic cakes and break it down. This month I want to do this, or the next 2 months I want to do that, etc. And then obviously, is mom paying for it or you paying for it?
Mom.
So hopefully you get good enough that you can sell your cakes to finance the next cake you want to bake and learn how to bake. Does that make sense? So all your dogs are going to get very fat. So I think your time frame is too long, and your scope on how many cakes you want to bake is too big. So choose specific cakes, which means you might have to do some research and start with the ones that you like and want to, or other people want to eat. Does that make sense? And then break it down into, in 2 months I want to do this one, the next 2 months this one, the next 2 months, and then be specific. I will bake the cake until, how are you going to evaluate that it's good?
Taste, practice, I don't know.
Yeah, but you're very subjective on your own cake. Maybe your classmates need to evaluate and see if it's good.
Judges.
Judges, there we go. So choose the judges. Your Oma and your mom and a couple of classmates, so that it's a spread of people or something like that. I'm quite sure the classmates will be happy to help you eat cake. Yeah. Don't give it to boys because they'll eat anything. Yes?
Yeah, that's true.
2 things. One, that's true.
Yeah.
And 2, does this now sound specific?
Yes.
I want to get into MIT University when I'm 18 years old in programming mechanical engineering.
Okay. Yes, that sounds specific. And it's measurable. You're in or you're not? All right, cool.
Okay. And you're not
Cool. Damien, do you want to go? You happy?
Yes, I'm happy.
Okay.
I don't want to go there.
All right, cool. So has anyone else got any questions? Can we move on from here?
Yes.
Okay. Right, guys. This was an academic activity that we've just done. Can you see that just by tweaking it slightly, by adding this in, suddenly your brain starts forming plans? Am I right? While we were talking about it with Bridget, we added a couple of things in, and suddenly we have a game plan for Bridget. Even if it's not Bridget's game plan, there's suggestions and stuff that are coming in, and that's what happens. The more specific you are, your brain starts filling in the gaps and joining the dots. Does that make sense? Part of this now would be, and I'm going to use you as an example, to do right now, I need to do research on MIT and know what grades I have to get in. I need to find out how to get a student visa, because that's going to be important. I'm going to have to find out how much it costs, what the requirements are, and stuff like that. So you can start working towards all of that. Does that make sense? I'm going to say Shanae again. I know I am. Shantae is going to be researching the cakes that she likes, and then out of maybe top 10, choosing 5 to start with. Finding the best recipes, or maybe finding 3 different recipes for the same cake and practicing for the one that works for you. financing it because it's going to be expensive. How are you going to do that and how are you going to do it? Fortunately, she's doing something that she can generate an income on it while she's doing it. Does that make sense? How? She's going to sell the cake she's making. Okay, all right. So you now break down the steps to the to-do list, short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals. This is the long-term goal. 6 months is the long-term for us here. Does that make sense? You originally started as 2 years. I'm recommending a year because I think you can do that in a year. Okay. You all got it? Cool. Right. Any other questions about goal setting? So I'm going to share something, another way of doing it for you that is a similar style, but it's somebody's individual style. And Mrs. Aitchison will remember him. He's a man who's about this big and about this wide and talks with an Australian accent, mate. And his name is Kip McGrath. Now, Kip McGrath, the man, started the Kip McGrath franchise. There's 700 of them around the world. And in his Australian accent, he says, I like making big, hairy goals every year, mate. Big, hairy goals. And this is how he does it. Okay. So he makes himself, and it can depend on how many columns depending on what it... He asks himself, what do I want to do? Okay? Who do I need to help? How am I going to do it? Why am I going to do it? When am I going to do it? How do I know when it's done? So he asks questions like that. Do you see that these relate to the smarter goals? Do you understand what I'm saying? So he then generates it like this so that he can allocate the resources and the time to do it. So if you're getting stuck with smarter, it might be easier for you to write it down like this. It's my big hairy goal. Who's going to help me with it? How am I going to do it and why am I going to do it? This is very important. And it's something we're going to talk about now in the motivation. Okay. Mrs. Aitchison, do you want to add anything to this?
No.
Okay.
Did
Yes.
you guys meet him?
Yes. Had long conversations with him, in fact.
Where?
In Australia.
In 2 places, in Nelspruit at a conference and in Mamsentoti. And his son, Storm McGrath, because he sold the business to his son. Well, he handed it over to his son, who's the CEO now. He's also a big guy. Right.
So is that why you guys sold Kip McGrath and moved locations? Also
No.
because you wanted to focus on the school?
Yes, and it's not part of the conversation. I'll have that
Oh.
conversation outside of study skills.
Okay.
All right. Cool. So, let's talk about the why.
Why should we do that? So let's remind.
Fundamentally, this is about motivation. Okay, guys? Doesn't matter what your parents want you to do, doesn't matter what your goals are. The fact of the matter is, if we don't have an answer to that, is it going to happen? No, it will not happen. So, as an introduction, we generally consider that there are 2 types of motivation. What are those 2 types of motivation?
Self-motivation.
Self-motivation, I like that.
Peer motivation.
Peer motivation. It's a very interesting...
Okay.
Yes?
Okay. You guys are all wrong. It's intrinsic and extrinsic motivation.
What?
Yes, he was saving that up just to say that. A, that they were wrong, and B, to show off the answers.
What?
Yeah,
So, I'm going to ask Mr. Brian of the day here. Why did I put intrinsic next to self?
because it is self-motivation. It's not influenced by an outside factor.
It comes from within. And why did I put peer next to extrinsic motivation?
Because it's not coming from within, but that peer is very specific way of extrinsic motivation. Normally it's just an outsider's
Okay.
pressure on you to.
Very good.
It's super simple.
Sorry?
What?
Just keep it super simple, right? So, guys, it's exactly that. And that's why I wrote it on the board, because it is about self-motivation. It is intrinsic to you, okay? Internal. And peer, it doesn't only have to be peer, it can be family. When you're a grown-up, it'll be the bank, it'll be your boss one day. Is extrinsic. It comes from external factors, okay? Have you got that?
Yes.
So, which one of these motivating factors is considered to be the more powerful motivator? Yes.
Extrinsic.
Extrinsic.
Or peer.
So-
In-
Am I wrong?
It's not that you're wrong, it's part of a conversation. If you were younger, in other words, in primary school, probably around 9, from about, well, until about 12 years old, it would most definitely be the strongest and the biggest motivator in your life. But as you get older, something happens. Yes, puberty happens and your brain starts growing, and which means you often start taking more ownership and control. So the most powerful motivator is intrinsic motivation. In other words, I'm doing it because I want to,
Not because I have to.
not because you have to. So intrinsic motivation, and I'll explain why. Because intrinsic motivation is more often or not powered by a need or a want for the feeling of success. CC?
Yeah.
Okay. Whereas extrinsic motivation is more often than not motivated by fear. Be it a snot clap when you get home for failing a test when you're younger, to detention or etc., etc. Whereas intrinsic motivation talks about the feeling. Does it feel good when you achieve a goal?
Yes.
It's about that feeling and the dopamine that it releases in your brain. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, this is my chance to talk a little bit about the physiology of your brain. Okay, Trinity? So, gentlemen, whose brains in this room right now are more mature than the other, gender-wise? Yes?
Women,
Why?
well, women mature quicker than men. They rationalize.
Are you talking physically or physiologically, or are you talking mentally? Yes. So girls generally start puberty before boys do, am I right?
Yes.
About 2 years, plus minus. Which means they've got a 2-year head start on the formation. So your frontal cortex, the front part of your brain, is still growing, guys. And it'll grow until your early 20s. Now the frontal cortex, or the frontal lobe, is responsible for organization of thought, is for categorization. It's also responsible for consequence. Why do you think men get sent to war? Young men get sent to war.
They don't think
They're
about
fresh.
consequences.
They're fresh. Fresh cannon fodder. No, there's a reason for it. Because when you say run at that gun that is shooting bullets at you, you don't think of the consequence that bullets hurt and they'll kill you. You tell that to a 40-year-old man, he's going to go, you go first. Show me how it's done. Whereas teenage boys, gone.
Bam.
But
So it's about the consequence of it. It also is the reason why boys kill themselves on motorcycles and do stupid things in
No,
cars.
that's because it's fun.
And that's why no one will insure them.
The thrill is amazing.
And that is exactly, your words right there, ladies, is proof.
But so it's true.
It is true, and that's exactly, you're proving exactly what I'm saying. So at some point, let's say you were going to say something more intelligent than, it's a thrill and it feels good. Yes? So let's ask you this question. Why at EduInc do we say that EduInc is a place where you can make mistakes? And the home is a place that you can make mistakes.
Because you can only learn by making mistakes.
The consequences, you need to learn, your frontal cortex is still developing, and you need to learn that you are consequences for actions. So let's go into something more serious. I'm sure you've heard on the news all the school shootings that are happening in America right now.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And we won't go into the causes and things like that. Is it 40-year-old men doing it?
No.
It's teenagers. Do you think they really understand the concept of what is actually happening to those people?
No, and there
Yes.
came up a news article yesterday. It's teenagers, and every single school shooting has been by teenage
Boy.
boys. No,
Wait.
no girls.
Yes.
When did this start?
A while ago.
A while ago. There's been 20 of them now in the US this year alone.
This year, since January.
Oh.
So when the guys walk into that room, and I'll give you a little concept. There's something. I think there's a, looking at the guys walking into the room, they look like they've dressed up from something like SWAT or Counter-Strike or something like that. My question is there a distinction between reality and not reality, virtual reality? And do they think that those people will respawn and carry on again? And that's a game concept. Does that make sense? So it's a very real thing. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this to you about the frontal cortex, what we are doing right now and why the senior study skills is different to the junior study skills is that because your brains are developing and you're in a different place because of all the hormones coursing through your bodies, you are able to understand and start organizing your minds and creating structure for it. Does that make sense?
So,
Yes. Right. You will never get away from extrinsic motivator. Because you live in a society, there will always be some form of extrinsic motivation. Does that make sense? Self-motivation is something that you build within yourself. And even within the structures of EduInc, let's say, for example, you don't do well and you're not managing your time. What do? We apply an extrinsic motivation of maybe saying to you, you have to do daily report. What is that forcing you to do? Damien? What does daily report force you to do?
what?
Aiden?
Forces you to behave because you feel pressured to do bad because the daily report gets sent to your parents, and it's because the principal also reviews it.
But what are you getting in the classroom? You're getting feedback on a daily basis or an
Not
hourly
what I'm doing
basis,
wrong or what I'm doing right.
how you need to adjust your behavior. And it's not just behavior in the way you talk and speak, but also in your behavior towards your work. So how do you get off the daily report if that's why you're on?
Completing this thing.
Yeah, I get it.
By
Behave.
doing the opposite of the reason for being on daily report.
So when you move from an extrinsic motivator like that and demonstrate this, do you need to be on daily report?
No.
No. So it's a way of making that happen in a structured process that you know it's not just a switch that happens. Does that make sense? Right, so there's something I'd like you to consider, and we'll talk about it next week. I'd like you to write it down for me. One of the ways of dealing with this is rewards. And when it comes to your why and your motivation, I would like to talk a little bit more about the rewards. And there are 3 kinds of rewards available to you. Primary rewards, token rewards, and activity rewards. Primary rewards generally relate to food and drink. Token rewards are generally stuff and money. And activity rewards are things that you do.
Video game.
Yeah. To do as a reward. And what I'd like you to do is to consider this and give me some feedback about what your family's values relate to this. Some parents don't believe in giving you a reward. They believe that paying you to go to school and investing in your education is your responsibility to sort this out. And even if they don't give you stuff and bribe you to do the work, you might have goals on your side. You might say, if I'm finished studying this, I'll go and spend 50 minutes gaming because I really enjoy it, or I'll spend my pocket money on spoiling myself to some KFC or a McFlurry or something like that. Okay. Guys, that's it for today. Do you have any questions? No? Yes? Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.